Wheeler Road Baptist Church on this Mother's Day weekend. Hopefully next Sunday we'll start back our regular Sunday services. The governor has given us the okay as far as the church services are concerned. So we're looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing everybody next Sunday. Of course, our Sunday school will start at 10, preaching at 11, discipleship training at 5, and then preaching at 6. And then Wednesday night, we meet at 6:30. Of course, even though we have the okay from the governor to assemble together, still we need to use precaution because the virus has not gone away. Though we in Lawrence County, we do have a low percentage, still there's always that risk. And so we need to practice social distances as much as we can. And if you want to wear a mask, that'll be fine. That'll be no problem. But this morning I want to talk to you on this Mother's Day weekend about a mother's love. Now in our life, if we are a normal individual, there's a lot of people who show us affection and show us love in our lifetime. There is our aunts and our uncles, and there's our brothers and our sisters, and there is our fathers. But the greatest love that we know, which is next to the love of God, is the love of a mother. The love of a mother holds on when dad's done turned loose, your uncles and aunts, and cousins have done give up on you. That love of that mother lingers on. This morning there is tucked away in 1 Kings chapter 3, a unique story about two women. And I'm going to start reading in 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 16. Then there came two women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the third day after that, I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also. And we were together, there was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while the handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which had died, which I had buried. The other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. This said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. And they spake before the king. Then the king said, The one said, This is my son that's living, thy son that's dead. The other said, No, but thy son is dead, my son is living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought him a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to one and half to the other. Then spake the mother, whose the living child was, unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my Lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor hers, divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgments which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. This morning I want to speak to you about 5 things, 5 lessons I think we can get from these few verses in the Bible. This is not a beautiful setting. So here is 2 prostitutes who live in the same house. It was nothing uncommon to several families to live in the same dwelling place. But in this particular house, there was only 2 women, and they practiced the oldest profession in the world, that of prostitution. Each had a child. During the night, one child dies because the mother lays on it and smothers it to death or crushes it. And in the night, she trades out children. But in the daylight, the real mother realizes, hey, this is not my child. And so the thing comes to the king, King Solomon, for a hearing before the king. And that is where we took up on our reading. And out of this, there are 5 truths I think we can gather from this about motherhood. First of all, a mother's love overrides her character. So here is this prostitute, but in that dark character and in that ungodly practice, there is a diamond of motherhood sparkling. Some of the sorriest people you'll ever meet, some of the sorriest women you could ever meet, will turn out to be a mother that loves her child and watches after that child and pushes that child and protects that child from the sins that had engulfed them. This evidently was the kind of woman this woman was. You see, not many people live without scars. We all in our life, we have made mistakes, we have our scars. But folks, it is not the scars that we need to display before our children. What our children need is a godly example, and they need our love pushing them in the right direction. I think there's a prime example of that with Solomon's mother, Bathsheba. We won't go into detail about the sin of her and David, and we don't go into that. But what I want to say is this: in the Bible, as it talks about Solomon, it says that he was raised at his mother's knee. Now, what does that mean? That simply means that that woman watched after that boy, and she trained him and she taught him in the things of the Lord. Even though she may have committed adultery, and even though she may have been unfaithful to her husband, and even though she may have even been, on God, as far as God is concerned, a part of his murder, yet God granted her the pleasure and the privilege of raising the wisest man, and that would become not only the wisest, but the most wealthy man that would ever live. Motherhood. First of all, a mother's love overrides her character. But there's another thing here, and that's this: a mother's love overcomes her circumstances. Think of the circumstances this woman found herself in. First of all, she had no husband to help raise the child. And because she had this child, poverty was at her door, because she was out of work. She could not work for a season of time. She was living in an already crowded house with a person that probably, from what we read in the rest of the verses, I think we can surmise that this person that she was living with was probably not the sweetest person that you would ever meet. When I was a boy in the 50s, I guess it was, there was a lady in Mexico who had twins, and she learned the children were born with a birth defect, with a mental problem, and would never be any better, and she poisons her children. Now, that was such an odd thing to happen back then. Even in another country, it was talked about for months. But today, we have fallen so far away from the moral standards of God that you hear about children being mistreated and killed and poisoned all the time. Now let's look for a minute at this other woman. The other woman. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because when they were before Solomon, she said, go ahead and cut him too, go ahead and kill him. Well, she already had a dead child, What is the deal here? Why did you not just confess that she overlaid the child? For the simple reason, there was two things: public opinion, and then a mother who did that was often stoned to death. And so she's trying to escape the punishment, she thinks, that might come her way because she had laid on this child and took his life. And it seems to me like there's some lessons this woman teaches us about sin. If you want some lessons about sin, look at a sinner. And he'll teach you all the lessons you need to know. Look at his lifestyle. Look at his code of ethics. Look at how happy he is. And I'll teach you about sin. First thing about this woman, sin, she teaches us that impurities will always lead to deceit. Now you start thinking impure thoughts, pretty soon you're going to be deceiving people. You start lying, you'll keep on lying. You see, falsehood will always lead to falsehood. As somebody said it this way: if we tell one lie, you've got to tell 12 more lies just to bear that one lie that you told. And no doubt there was some jealousy, as we almost hear the ringing of her voice there before Solomon. There was some jealousy on her part that she had overlaid her son, and he was now deceased. But I think the great lesson she teaches us is this: there is no security in sin. No security in sin. No security. For anybody that's around the sinner, here's what she said: divide it. Give me half and her half. Let's be straight here. So there's no security in sin. If you're associating with people that are sinful, I mean really sinful, there's no security in what they say, no security in what they do. But there's a third lesson I think this woman teaches us: that mother's love always overrides conflict. Now ladies, you know, those of you that are older, you sure know it, and some of you that are younger that are listening today, Satan from the very beginning is after your child, boy or girl. Immediately when that child is born and that soul comes into existence, Satan immediately begins to try to take that child, trying to deceive the mind, trying to kill the body, trying to get another residence of hell. Today he's got a lot to work with. He's got TV to work with. He's got alcohol to work with. He's got drugs to work with. He got a lot to work with. And a lot of conflict will come when Satan tries to take the child. That's why it's so important to draw those children to us and try to teach them the things of God. That's why church is so important. That's why it's so absolutely necessary that we keep our family in church. The devil will try to deceive the mind, kill the body of our children. But sometimes there's conflicts between the parents, and that affects the child. Sometimes Papa just throws a monkey wrench in the gearbox on the way we're doing, and we have to overcome that. And sometimes as that child gets older, there's conflict with the child. Now believe it or not, that sweet little angel that you're dressing up on Sunday and you're combing his hair, or you're putting a bow in her hair, and she looks like a little bitty angel, and indeed she is at that point. But believe it or not, that child will turn 16. You got a different animal now. Music is different. Go get rid of all your Bill Monroe tapes. Gonna be some rap going on in that car. Those clothes that you thought was really nice and were nice when you was growing up, they're all changed now. Sometimes, grandparents is part of that conflict. We can get pretty cantankerous. I mean, we can get real cantankerous. when it comes to our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. Because if you that have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, you know this. You know they never do anything wrong. Never do anything wrong. As I think about my grandchildren, boy, I just think of perfection. Perfection. And sometimes our thinking that way might interfere if we let it with the raising of the children. But now there's a fourth thing. A mother's love will always be overlaid in compassion. Now the word compassion means to feel the feeling of another person. To feel the burn if a person is burned. To feel the heartache. And that's what this woman was doing. If you look at verse 26, here's what the Bible says. And then spake the woman, the living child was unto the king, and lo, this her son. For her bowels yearned upon her son. She thought about her son. She had compassion. She could feel the sword going through her own body. She could feel the pain that this young man would feel. And she said, no, give it to the other woman. Now, she could have just kept quiet. That would have fixed everything. That would have solved all of her problems. Why did she? Because of one word, L-O-V-E. She loved her son. She loved that little bundle of joy. She may not have even known who the child's father was. And this child, by all probability, grew up without a father. But I am almost certain in saying, and I think I can say this from looking back the years I've been here on this earth, that this child made a difference in the life of this woman. I've known men who had drinking problems until that first child was born. And then all of a sudden, they quit. This child, no doubt, would make this woman a better person. Look at the compassionate mothers in the Bible. Think of how God has blessed us just by the mothers in the Bible. There, first of all, is Hagar. You remember her, a handmaid of Abraham. There came a time when Ishmael was about 16 years old and Isaac was about 2 or 3, that he began to pick at Isaac. Sarah said, she's got to go. Her and this son has got to go. But as they left, the Bible says that God made this promise to Hagar. Your son will become a great nation of people. And then there was Hannah, the mother of Samuel. Hannah was one of 2 wives, but she was a barren wife. The other wife would often poke fun at her. And when they went up to the temple on their annual visit, she would go into the temple and pray at night and ask God for a child. One night Eli the priest heard her and said, this time next year, you'll have a child. And she made God this promise. She said, God, if you'll give me a child, I'll give him back to you. And sure enough, the next year, Samuel was born. And when he was weaned, she takes him and she presents him to Eli the priest. And Samuel would become one of the great leaders of Israel. He would become the priest. He would become the high priest and one of the judges. Isaiah in his prophecy. Let me tell you what's important about Isaiah's prophecy. Most prophets are looking forward. But the prophets of Isaiah is unique because Isaiah is at the end time. God's got him all the way at the end of all history, and he's looking back. So Isaiah is not saying this is the way it's going to be. Isaiah and his prophets is saying this is the way it's already been. This is the way that it was. And here's what he said in Isaiah 49:15. Can a woman forget her suckling child that she shall not have compassion? Is it really possible for any kind of a mother who has a child not to have compassion upon that child? But now there's a fifth and a final lesson that this woman teaches us. A mother's love carries her pleas before God. See, what did this woman do? What could she do? I mean, here she is, she's before the king, he's not only the king, he is the supreme judge, she's before him, here's somebody contradicting what she says. What can she do? The only thing she could do, and the right thing to do, is this: she made intercessions on behalf of her son. That's all she could do. And the basic analysis of all life, so many things you cannot change. Some things you can. But some things you cannot change. The only thing you can do is make intercessions before God on behalf of that child. And here's what the king said: give her the child. She's the mother. How did he know that? Because of the love that this woman had for her child. She was willing to give him up just so that he could live. Let me ask those of you that are watching today, how many of us today would be in hell if it wasn't for the prayers of our mother? How many of us would be in hell if it wasn't for the prayers of our mother? There was an older preacher that I had the privilege of hearing named John Borden years ago. And one of the meetings, evangelism meetings I went to, he was a speaker there, and he told about going out to a small rural community to do a revival. Now this would have been in the late 30s or early 40s, somewhere that span of time. And he said one of the deacons picked him up at the bus station, was carrying where he's going to stay. And he said, as they drove along the highway, the man said, well, our Sunday school director lives there. That's a nice brick house. And one of our deacons lived right there. And on they went. He said they turned off the highway, got on the rock road. They turned off the rock road, got on the dirt road. They drove about a mile, and they stopped. There was a fence, and the fellow said, we're going to have to walk from here on. And about 100 yards in the field, there was this house, a little house where a widow woman and her two sons lived. And he said it was in August. He was sleeping in a back room. There's a feather bed. He's about to burn up so hot you couldn't hardly stand. And he was thinking, why am I here? Why did the church put me here? There's so many, we passed by a lot of nice houses. Why am I here? Then he said, from the next room, he heard this woman pray. And she was praying, God, save my boys. God, save my boys. John Pop really said, I got in on my knees. She didn't know I was praying, but I was praying for her boys too. Didn't know that this is why I'm here. And those boys got saved during that meeting. We see this kind of spirit coming out in the mother of James and John. She said to Jesus, let my boys sit by you, and when you come into your kingdom, let one sit on the right and one sit on the left. Now, what did Jesus say? Basically, he said, lady, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not my decision. That decision has been made in heaven. Now, sometimes, I think there's a great lesson here. Sometimes we want for our children what is great and mighty in our sight. See, it may not be God's will for my boy to be the best quarterback in the county. It may not be God's will for my daughter to be the star cheerleader. But you know what? I can thank God that they're healthy enough to be on the field. I can thank God they're healthy enough to have a normal life. You see, I think you ought to do all you can to help your kids, but the thing of it is, be careful that you don't get them out of God's design and God's plan for their life, or you'll have some miserable young people growing up, and you will have some wayward adults at the end of the way. The Bible says, bring up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he'll not depart from it. Many of a parent who had wayward children has clinged to this and said, thank God. Now God said, if I bring them up, and I did, that God would bring them back. Well, that's a great truth, but that's really not what what this verse really is talking about. The word bending of a bow, the word way means the bending of a bow. That is, when you bend the bow, it's got a certain way it's bent. It's going to bend this way, it's not going to bend that way, not going to bend that way, it's going to bend this way. So what the Bible is saying is, bring up a child. And be sensitive to how he thinks. Be sensitive to what the characteristic God's given. Be sensitive about the physical makeup of the child. You see, you got a child that's 5'4", he's probably not going to play NBA basketball. You may well wipe that out. Sometimes our physical makeup determines what we're capable of doing. The main thing is this. Love the children. Love them. Find out what God's will is for their life. Find out where their inclination lies. Find out where their interest is at. And push them in that direction. If this was a normal worship service and all you mothers was here, I'd ask you right now to stand up and tell what you wanted for your child. What you'd like to see them do in their lifetime. Well, many of us have already passed by the children. We're working on grandchildren, and some of us working on great-grandchildren. But you know, as time goes on, we learn great lessons, not only from the Bible, but from life itself. How many of us today would be here if it wasn't for a praying mother? Think of all the mothers that pray at the altars of the church. Not just on Mother's Day, but other times. They pray. I'm telling you, where we're at today. We're where we're at today. Because there has been mothers praying at the altars of churches, praying at the altars they have at their house, praying, driving, praying wherever they are, praying for those children. And God hearing those prayers and blessing. Let me say to all you mothers out there, you're a blessing not only to your family, not only to the church, but you're a blessing to God who's in heaven. Now let's pray together. Dear Lord God, we want to thank you for every mother that was ever born into this world. Giving birth to those precious children, and time goes on, God. And some of them you call into the ministry. Some will become song leaders. Some will become doctors. Some will become other men. Some will greatly bless society in a great way. But Lord, how wonderful it is from experience as I look back on my life, how wonderful it is to have a mother you know that's praying for you. And Lord, I ask you to bless the mothers, for I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.